These are highlights of the Secret Service director being questioned by Congress a few days ago. I cut it up into little pieces so you can check, so you can focus on certain small points. Point one is that there are two agendas for this questioning. One you're going to see is related to guns. The other is a little less obvious, but it's focused on DEI hires. These are two things that Trump will be campaigning on for when he gets in office. Uh, the DEI hires, he's going to try to eliminate this whole standard from government. And the guns, he's not going to touch guns, but that's more in the realm of Kamala Harris. And it's an agenda of Congress. So you're going to see those 2 points being bounced around like a volleyball in there. They're trying to get sound bites and things that they can use in campaigns going forward to get these agendas pushed. Also, there's some information in there about the shooting that you might find interesting. The timeline of when they found out who the guy was and the fact that he was a threat, and some other interesting things. Um, yeah, I cut it into small bits so you can digest it without too much trouble. Have a look.
What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania was a double failure. The failure by the Secret Service to properly protect former President Trump and the failure of Congress to properly protect our people from criminal gun violence. We must therefore also ask hard questions about whether our laws are making it too easy for potential assassins to obtain firearms generally and the AR-15 specifically. Mr. Comparatori, former President Trump, and the other rally attendees wounded in Butler are now members of a club no one wants to belong to, the thousands of people who have fallen victim to mass shootings. Last year, we had 655 mass shootings in America, defined as 4 or more people being shot or killed in a single event, not including the shooter. 712 people died and nearly 2,700 people were wounded in these attacks in 2023. Mass shootings are commonplace. They happen at political rallies and constituent meetings, in our elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, in churches, synagogues, and mosques, in movie theaters and parades, in nightclubs and grocery stores, in concerts, and on street corners. Here are the worst mass shootings in the last 11 or 12 years. The list is a grim reminder of the horrific damage and death wrought by assault weapons and the AR-15 in particular that have taken the lives of our children, parents, colleagues, and neighbors. This is a very partial list. Mass shootings have become so frequent that we don't even hear about them anymore. Since the mass shooting in Butler, there have already been at least 10 additional mass shootings in America, 2 of which took place the same day that former President Trump was targeted. One of the mass shootings on that violent Saturday, July 13th, happened at 11 p.m. at a nightclub in Birmingham, Alabama, where 4 people were shot dead and 10 others wounded. This means, amazingly, that the Butler attack was not even the deadliest mass shooting to happen in America on that day. A weapon that can be used to commit a mass shooting at an event under the full protection of the Secret Service, together with dozens of state and local police, is obviously an intolerable threat to the rest of us who do not receive such protection and obviously does not belong in our communities. It's time to pass universal background checks and build on this administration's work to ensure that we permanently close the loopholes in the Brady law for gun show purchases, online purchases, and private sales to prevent those weapons from getting into the hands of people we know to be a threat to others. What happened in Butler shows why even closing these loopholes, however, will not keep assault weapons out of the hands of potential assassins and mass murderers. Under federal law and in the vast majority of states, even young people not old enough to buy a beer legally can legally purchase and own the AR-15 and carry it in public. The shooter in Butler used his father's AR-15. We have to find the courage and resolve to pass a ban on the AR-15 and other assault weapons. A ban has broad support. Even the New York Post loudly endorsed such a ban in 2019. We have passed an assault weapons ban before. Republicans and Democrats together passed it in 1994. Alas, in 2004, we allowed the ban to expire. We know this weapons ban worked. One study found that in the decade that followed the ban's lapse, mass shootings went back up 183%, and deaths from mass shootings went up 239%. But even as we change the Secret Service and act to ban weapons of war like the AR-15, we still will have fallen short of our duty if we fail to denounce every instance of politically motivated violence in whatever form it takes.
Your opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Cheatle, and I am the Director of the United States Secret Service. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to the family of Corey Comparator, a former fire chief and a hero who was killed in this senseless shooting. I would also like to acknowledge those who were injured in Butler, David Dutch and James Copenhagen, and I wish them a speedy recovery. I would be remiss if I did not also extend my condolences on the passing of your colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Ms. Jackson Lee was always engaged in the oversight of the Secret Service, and her passing is a great loss to this body. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency. We are fully cooperating with ongoing investigations. We must learn what happened, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure that an incident like July 13th does not happen again. Let me state unequivocally, nothing I have said should be interpreted to place blame for this failure on our federal, state, or local law enforcement partners who supported the Secret Service in Butler. We could not do our job without them. We rely on the relationships built over years of working together to secure events and conduct investigations. Our agents, officers, and support personnel understand that every day we are expected to sacrifice our lives to execute a no-fail mission. As witnessed on July 13th, our special agents shielded former President Trump with their own bodies on stage while shots were being fired. Selflessly willing to make the ultimate sacrifice without hesitation, I am proud beyond words of the actions taken by the former president's detail, the counter-sniper team who neutralized the gunman, and the tactical team who was prepared to act. I will be transparent as possible when I speak with you, understanding, though, at times that I may be limited in providing a thorough response in this open setting due to associated risks with sharing highly sensitive protective methodologies. I do not want to inadvertently provide you today with inaccurate information. Since January 1st, 2024, the Secret Service has successfully secured over 7,500 sites. Every protective advance comes with its own set of challenges and requires a customized mitigation strategy, including specific assets. Security plans are multi-layered, providing 360 degrees of protection. These layers include personnel, technical, and tactical assets. Our mission is not political. It is literally a matter of life and death, and the tragic events on July 13th remind us of that. I have full confidence in the men and women of the Secret Service. They are worthy of our support in executing our protective mission. I will now answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Director Cheatle. We'll now begin our 5 minutes questions, and I will begin. Just for the record, the Secret Service has an annual budget of around $3.1 billion, and I believe around 8,000 employees. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there were many security failures on the day of the attempted assassination and leading up to that day. Let's start with the building that the shooter used to shoot President Trump from. At any point Saturday, did the Secret Service have an agent on top of that roof?
Sir, I'm sure, as you can imagine, that we are just 9 days out from this incident, and there's still an ongoing investigation. And so I want to make sure that any information that we are providing to you is factual.
You can't, okay. Why did the Secret Service not, can you answer why the Secret Service didn't place a single agent on the roof?
We are still looking into the advanced process and the decisions that were made.
Well, okay. Wasn't that building within the perimeter that should be secured? Do we agree with that?
The building was outside of the perimeter on the day of the visit, but again, that is one of the things that during the investigation we want to take a look at and determine whether or not other decisions should have been made.
One of the things that you said, I believe, in an interview, that there wasn't an agent on the roof because it was a sloped roof. Is that normal, and do you fear that that immediately creates an opportunity for future would-be assassins to look for a slanted roof? I mean, this is a huge question that every American has. Why wasn't a Secret Service agent on the roof? And there have been reports that agents were supposed to be on the roof, but it was hot that day and they didn't want to be on the roof. Can you answer any of those questions, Director?
So I appreciate you asking me that question, Chairman. I should have been more clear in my answer when I spoke about where we placed personnel in that interview. What I can tell you is that there was a plan in place to provide overwatch, and we are still looking into responsibilities and who was going to provide overwatch. But the Secret Service in general, not speaking specifically to this incident, when we are providing overwatch, whether that be through counter snipers or other technology, prefer to have sterile rooftops.
Did the Secret Service use any drones for surveillance that day?
So again, I'm not going to get into specifics of that day in itself, but there are times during a security plan that the Secret Service does deploy an asset like a drone.
There were reports that the shooter used a drone just a few hours before the rally start time. Is that accurate?
I have heard those same reports, and again, am waiting for the final report.
Do you know, if you can't answer the question, that's your answer. But can you answer this? Do you know, I'm not asking yes or no, but do you know if the shooter used a drone before the shooting?
That information has been passed to us from the FBI.
How many Secret Service agents were assigned to President Trump on the day of the rally?
Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the numbers of personnel that we had there, but we feel that there was a sufficient number of agents assigned.
There are reports that several agents assigned to the rally on July 13th were temporary agents not normally assigned to President Trump. Is that accurate?
What I can tell you is that the agents that were assigned to former President Trump are Secret Service agents that provide close protection to him, and that was what was actual on that day.
How many temporary agents were there that day?
Quite frequently, sir, during campaign events, the Secret Service utilizes agents from HSI or the Department of Homeland Security.
You don't know how many, or you
supplement
can't answer?
our plan.
Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise movements over the past days, weeks, and months?
So, again,
We need to have confidence that if the FBI is leading this investigation, that they're leading a credible investigation, because there's some of us sitting up here today that don't have a lot of confidence in the FBI. So I will repeat the question. Have the investigators reconstructed the shooter's precise moments over the past days, weeks, and months?
I understand your question, Chairman, and I share your concerns about wanting to make sure that we have factual information. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation. The Secret Service is conducting an internal investigation. There are a number of OIG investigations, and there is the external investigation that the President
Last question for me. Before July 13th, had the Trump detail requested additional resources?
What I can tell you is that for the event on July 13th, the details that were the assets that were requested for that day were given.
Okay. My time has expired. Chair now recognizes Ranking Member Raskin for 5 minutes.
That is both, for Iran, a generalized threat. They're targeting these individuals, but also most recently, a specific threat to Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to enter into the record by UC, a Department of Justice Public Affairs release, a CNN article, an article from Fox News, and an article from CBS, all of which acknowledge
Without objection to order.
that this threat exists for Donald Trump from Iran, and that there are specific threats, most recently, that have been acknowledged. Director Cheatle, have you read the intelligence of the generalized threat to Donald Trump by Iran as a result of their desire to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani.
I have.
Have you read or been briefed about the intelligence of the specific recent threat to Donald Trump from Iran?
Yes, I have.
Director Wray, when we were getting our briefing, indicated that he thought the threat assessment should have included this threat from Iran. Is it your testimony today that the threat assessment, since you've read this intelligence, was sufficient to protect him from this threat from Iran?
My testimony today is that the information that we had at the time was known.
Was it sufficient? Director Cheatle, was it sufficient for the Iranian threat that you said you have read the intelligence briefings for?
That information was passed to...
Well, I'm not asking the
Cheatle?
bureaucratic issue of who did it get passed around to. Director Cheatle, was it sufficient for the specific and generalized threat to Donald Trump's life from Iran?
Yes, I do believe it was.
Director Cheatle, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old?
Sir, I think we've acknowledged that there was gaps and a failure that day.
When I raised this issue with Director Wray, he was incensed. He was shocked that the threat assessment of Iran did not seem to be, as we and I discussed, baked in to your security footprint and your threat assessment. And he went on to say that the generalized threat that he has told the whole country that we are under from a potential terrorist threat. He has said we're under the highest threat level since 9/11, that the lights are flashing red. And he has specifically indicated that people have crossed the southern border as a result of the Biden administration's policy, and that there are in our country today terrorists and individuals who are affiliated with terrorist groups and organizations. That would be a heightened threat environment, Director Cheatle, would it not?
Yes.
In his public statements, he has said he is making these statements because he wants people to take them into consideration in threat assessments, specifically.
I will stipulate that there's an ongoing investigation. You don't want to go into too much detail on that until you've been able to ascertain all the facts and analyze what they mean. You can understand, however, the anxiety we and the American public have about how could this happen and how can we ensure it can't recur. Now, there are some things my friends on one particular side of the aisle don't really want to talk about, like AR-15s and access to them by a 20-year-old, or anybody for that matter. Presumably, Director Cheatle, the ubiquity of weapons, guns in America, especially assault weapons or semi-automatic weapons, that's helped your job and the mission of your agencies, right? It's made it less complicated, isn't that true?
I want to talk a little bit about the timeline. Now, here's what we know, and I know, Director, you were also on the call that we had a few days ago with the FBI and other law enforcement, so I respect that you are not able to share, based on your testimony, some of the details that are currently being investigated, but I know you were on the call because I heard you on the call and you heard them too. So I'm going to lay out the timeline a little bit. On July 3rd, the rally was announced that it was going to be in Butler. On July 6th, 3 days later, we know that the shooter searched for dates for Trump and DNC events. On July 7th, so this is 4 days after the announcement, the shooter went to the site. He actually physically went to the site. On July 12th, the shooter went to a gun range where he and his dad regularly go and practiced shooting. And the next day, on July 13th, he went to the site again before the rally began. We know that he then went and searched online for a gun store where he went and he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition, went home, got his father's AR, which was legally purchased, and returned to the venue. At 5 p.m. that evening, this is more than an hour before Donald Trump actually took the stage that evening, local law enforcement were made aware that there was a suspicious man. In fact, at 5:20, local law enforcement flagged that he had a rangefinder, and they radioed their concerns and sent around pictures of the individual. At 5:40, 20 minutes before local law enforcement actually identified the shooter, and at 5:51, Secret Service was notified of the suspicious person by the state police, and 1 minute later, they distributed that information. That was before Donald Trump even took the stage. That was 11 minutes before he took the stage. So the Secret Service was aware that there was a suspicious person. At 6:03, he took the stage. At 6:09, rallygoers, as was shown in the video, identified this gentleman climbing on the roof. At 6:11, 3 shots were heard, 3 rounds of shots, and of course, the president and the other victims were shot. This shooter was a 20-year-old young man, no criminal record, legally purchased gun and ammunition, who for days in the lead up to this shooting was searching mass shooters. He even had a picture of a mass shooter on his cell phone the day of the shooting. He searched for explosives. He searched high-level officials. So the American people want to know, how did a 20-year-old young man with access to a military-style weapon actually bring it onto an unsecured perimeter who for days had been planning a mass shooting event?
Came to Congress, I used to work advance for a major political candidate and have interacted with many different law enforcement agencies on large political events like the one that just happened. How many times was the Secret Service alerted about a suspicious person at the July 13th campaign event prior to the first shot being shot?
I don't have an exact number to share with you today, but from what I've been able to discern, somewhere between 2 and 5 times there was some sort of communication about a suspicious individual.
To the Secret Service specifically? Mm-hmm. According to reports, the shooter was photographed twice by security officers prior to the shooting. A police officer saw the shooter on the ground and reported him with a photograph as a suspicious person. Multiple local law enforcement officers identified the shooter, radioed that he was acting suspiciously near the event's magnetometers. A local law enforcement tactical team saw the shooter on a roof and notified other security services and also photographed him. One police officer who photographed the shooter saw him scoping out the roof and carrying a rangefinder. My question is, and you've answered this, but why, or you haven't answered this, why wasn't the event paused right then?
So these are nothing but pathetic excuses, and they make no sense, and they're a bunch of cow dung. All the law enforcement I've spoken with over the last 9 days are amazed that the AGR rooftop was not secure. And you want to know why? Because it's dangerous. I have never had any long gun training in my life. I own an AR-15, and last time I shot it one time my whole life. It was 6 years ago. That is until Saturday, where we recreated the events in Savoy, Texas, where we recreated what happened in Butler. I was lying prone on a sloped roof at 130 yards at 6:30 at night. And I knew that he had a scope. I didn't know what kind, red dot or magnified. So I shot 8 rounds from both. You know what the result was? 15 out of 16 kill shots. And the one I missed would have hit the president's ear. That's a 94% success rate. And that shooter was a better shot than me. It is a miracle President Trump wasn't killed. Corey Comparatore's life is over because that damn shooter made it on the roof. And it wasn't the roof that was dangerous. It was the nut job on top of the roof. You know what else is dangerous? I believe your horrifying ineptitude and your lack of skilled leadership is a disgrace. Your obfuscating today is shameful. And you should be fired immediately and go back to Garden Doritos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yes or no? Do you believe that stricter controls on the availability of assault weapons would make it easier for the Secret Service to fulfill its missions of protecting public officials?
I think the Secret Service is tasked with providing a safe environment, which is why we put into place a number of mitigation factors.
Certainly, but do assault weapons make it easier or harder for you to do your job?
I think that any weapon makes it difficult for us to do our job.
Okay, I yield back.
Chair Doe recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. Director, real quick, at what time was Secret Service aware of the active threat against President Trump? Director, what time?
So the Secret Service was aware that there was an individual who had been identified as suspicious, and that individual was attempting to be tracked down.
At what time?
I don't have a specific timeline other than to tell
Director,
you.
it's been 9 days.
I
At
understand
what
that.
time?
I want to make sure that I give you factual information, sir.
Director, have you talked to the agents on the ground that day?
Yes, I have.
You've talked to all of them. Your senior team has talked to every agent that was on the ground that day.
Yes, we have.
Have they all corroborated the same time they identified the shooter or they were made aware of the shooter either by attendees in the crowd or local police department?
There are a number of reports of when those times were made.
Was it
those
5 minutes
notifications.
before the first shot rang out?
No,
Generally speaking, was it 10 minutes before the first shot rang out?
no.
Was it 15 minutes before the first shot rang out?
It was less than that time frame when it was identified as a threat.
How many days before the shooting took place did Secret Service actually do their advance work to secure the facility that the rally was going to be held at?
5 days.
In the 5 days prior, when the security advance team did their work, did they identify the rooftop as a potential threat?
Again, I'm pulling those reports and that information.
It's been 9
to
days,
conduct those
Madam
interviews.
Director. Did they notice a rooftop 150 yards away that was a potential threat? Yes or no?
I am certain that the rooftop was noticed. I am pulling the reports.
What was the security parameters around securing that rooftop? What did they do?
There was overwatch provided for that rooftop.
Did Overwatch fail?
I am waiting to hear what the results of the investigation were so that I can identify where the failure was.
Who did you talk to that was on the ground that day that was responsible for Overwatch? What are their names?
I'm not going to provide their names in this setting.
Did you talk to the people that were providing Overwatch that day?
I've talked to the people that conducted the advance on that day and that were working the shift and were the counter snipers on that day.
So you talked to the counter sniper team, you talked to the people who were providing Overwatch that day, and you talked to the advance team, correct?
Yes, sir.
What did they tell you?
We are putting together a comprehensive report so that I can identify exactly where the gaps and the failures.
When the counter sniper team was on the roof and they identified that there was suspicious activity on the roof in question, what was the chain of command's orders around the person on said roof? Because I'm quite sure somebody saw under your organization, the Secret Service, I'm quite sure somebody saw the shooter on the roof. So what was the communication through the chain of command to deal with said person?
What I can tell you is that when the individual was identified by the counter sniper, they took one shot and neutralized that individual.
But that was after the shooter already took a shot, is that correct?
That is correct.
So what you're saying now is that the Secret Service did not see the shooter on the roof until after the shooter took a shot?
I do not have all of those details at this time.
If you don't have those details after 9 days, Director, then what you're telling me is that you guys didn't see it. Is that correct?
I am telling you I don't have all the details of the sequence at this time.
Director, it's been 9 days. Either you have the information or you do not. Is that correct?
We are still in the process of conducting interviews and an investigation.
Some of my colleagues have texted me over the last couple days, bipartisan, about whether you should lose your job. And I've been quiet on that question because I wanted to see what you were going to do today. In my opinion, you do need to be fired immediately. And it is because this is gross incompetence. And the fact that it's been 9 days, and these are simple questions to answer, I'm quite sure if I asked any one of my kids if they got in trouble and I told them to give me the details, I would get more answers from them than I'm getting from you right now. And that's what's frustrating on a bipartisan basis, on a nonpartisan basis. This is a joke. And Director, you're in charge, and that's why you need to go. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
So it was not within the, it was not, so what, was there a device located on Mr. Crook's body to detonate the vehicle?
That is the information that I have.
So what would be the point of detonating the vehicle if it was not inside the perimeter?
I have no idea what Mr. Crook's motivation was.
Ma'am, the fact that you haven't, I'll close with this, Mr. Chairman, haven't even visited the site. I understand there are other things going on, but the culture of your organization, the culture, that doesn't, do you know how tall the president is? How tall is the president? President Trump, how tall is he?
I don't, he's over 6 feet tall. I don't have
Okay,
the
so
exact
do you assign agents based on their ability to cover physically and carry, if necessary, the President of the United States when you assign them to this mission? Is that a parameter that is considered?
I assign agents to work our protectees that are capable and have been trained by the Secret Service.
I understand they're trained, but if you're not tall enough, it has nothing to do with, we're not mad at you, but if somebody's 7 feet tall and you're 5 feet tall, there's going to be a delta there that is problematic in protecting the protectee. And I'm asking, is that a consideration when these agents, not saying you, but when they're assigned to the protectee?
The agents that are assigned to our protectees are perfectly capable.
Okay, ma'am. So
of
the
providing
culture is what I'm
protection.
concerned about, because the primary objective here seems to be something other than securing the site, securing the principal, and securing the people at the site. And that's the concern based on the answers that you've given today so far. Without a yield, Mr. Chairman.
There are a number of times that we do use drone technology. I'm not speaking specifically to this event and what was utilized or not. There are times when drone technology is available and helpful at events, and there are times when it is not appropriate.
Do y'all use Signal? Do you personally use Signal to communicate with any official from the White House? Signal on your phone?
Oh, on occasion, I'm sure that there are people that use Signal, yes.
Okay. Do you use it to speak with the White House? Use Signal?
No, I do not.
Okay. When was Thomas Crooks first identified as a person of interest? Let me help you. At 5:10, he was spotted with a rangefinder at 5:51. And when did Secret Service notice him?
Again, I don't have those specific timelines, but it was a relatively short period of time.
Let me help you. 5:52. Ms. Cheatle, why was President Trump allowed on stage 10 minutes after the Secret Service spotted a suspicious individual? That seems to me to be the worst thing of all. Of all the breakdown and all this communication, all the BS you've been feeding us here today or not feeding us, that seems to be the question.
So as I've stated before, there are a number of events where suspicious people may be identified. That doesn't necessarily...
Ma'am, I submit to you, you got a guy who's going to be the next president of the United States. He's on stage. I've been to these events. We've all been to these events. A car backfires, and there's a 15-minute dadgum wait. That's not acceptable. Did the Secret Service tell President Trump they'd spotted a suspicious individual before he was shot?
I am unclear as to what the communication was with the former president
Okay,
at that
I'll
time.
take that as a no.
That is absolutely unacceptable. That means you are a failure at your job. Let's talk about things that are prohibited in Trump rallies. And I've been to a lot of Trump rallies. Backpacks and bags, bicycles, firearms, any type of weapon, or any other item determined to be a potential safety hazard, like a rangefinder would be one. At 5:10, Crooks is first observed by one of the snipers, AGR Sniper 1, at the building. 5:10, President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. 5:28, AGR Sniper 1 takes a picture of a bicycle and 2 bags. Those belong to Crooks. 5:32, AGR Sniper 1 spots Crooks looking at his phone and using a rangefinder. 5:55, Butler ESU Command confirms receipt of photos and states they have been relayed on. 6:05 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 later communicates that Crooks is seen moving northeast in direction of Sheets and that Crooks has a backpack. 2 minutes before the shooting, while President Trump has been allowed to take the stage, people see Crooks laying on his stomach in a sniper position on the roof, and they're yelling he has a gun, and they are trying to alert law enforcement and Secret Service. Why was Crooks not shot by the snipers? Why was he allowed to be there?
As soon as the individual was identified as a threat, They were
No. What do you consider to be a threat? A man with a gun laying in a sniper position, a man that had a backpack, a man that had a bicycle, a man that had a rangefinder. At what point is he determined a threat?
An individual with a backpack is not a threat. An individual with a rangefinder is not a threat.
What about a man laying on a building that has direct line of sight of President Trump with a gun that people are screaming and pointing out? Is that a threat, Ms. Cheatle?
Once that individual was identified, they were neutralized.
No, they were neutralized. Crooks was neutralized after he shot President Trump in the face, Ms. Cheatle. Is he only a threat once he fires the weapon?
As soon as the counter sniper identified that individual, they were able to neutralize them.
How were people in the crowd? Okay, then let's just take it this way. People under your command did not consider him to be a threat, yet people in the crowd knew he had a gun and considered him to be a threat. That means that you are a complete failure as the director of the Secret Service, that people under your command don't perceive a man laying on a roof with direct line to the president with a gun. They don't perceive that to be a threat, yet the people in the crowd do. How is that possible?
To any law enforcement personnel.
No, you knew, that everyone knew. The people there knew that there was a danger. They knew there was a threat to President Trump, and it was allowed to happen. Was there a stand-down order, Ms. Cheatle? Was there a conspiracy to kill President Trump?
Absolutely not.
Then how did this happen? And why are you still sitting here not turning in your letter of resignation?
Last question, but please answer, and then I'll recognize Ms. Presley. Please answer that question.
That is what we are investigating to determine.
We're waiting for your letter. We are waiting for your letter of resignation, and you really need to consider doing that before you leave today.
Dr. Cheatle, how long have you been with the Secret Service? 29 years, right?
That's correct.
And how long have you been director of the Secret Service?
Just under 2 years.
During your tenure as director under the Secret Service, I know we're here today to talk about the assassination attempt on President Trump, but how many other security lapses have occurred with protectees under your watch?
I don't have a specific number, but there have been some lapses.
There have been other lapses. Was one of them Jake Sullivan?
Yes, sir.
What happened there?
There was an individual who was able to access Mr. Sullivan's residence.
His residence. A protectee, somebody was able to break into his house. And what happened? Did anyone get fired because of that?
There were individuals who have been reassigned.
Reassigned. What other steps have taken? What I'm seeing. What other incidents have occurred other than Jake Sullivan? Was there an issue with the Secret Service agent and Vice President Harris?
I would not call that a security incident.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, you have security lapses with President Trump. You have security lapses with Jake Sullivan. You have issues with your personnel related to Vice President Kamala Harris. There seems to be a repeated theme here. Would you not agree with that?
I think that we are talking about separate categories of incidents.
Well, I would disagree with that. I mean, I think there's a repeated theme when you've got protectees and you're not upholding your core mission.
From this whole entire briefing, it doesn't seem like much information has been able to get out to the American people, so I'm trying to dispel rumors, as I'm sure you understand. Was it true that Secret Service was present at the Butler ESU briefing?
There was a briefing between the counter sniper teams that were working on the ground.
Was Secret Service present?
Yes, to my knowledge.
Okay, I want to read you a report from people that seem to be throwing you under the bus and stated that they were in attendance and that Secret Service was not in attendance at the security briefing, according to individuals with knowledge, to also include that the AGR building where the shooter Thomas Matthew Crooks was located was actually not a part of their security perimeter for that. So there was not Secret Service present. It seems as though that when you were asked earlier from Rep. Kristamorthy about whether or not Secret Service was aware of a threat, you had said no, they were unaware of a threat. And yet, according to communications, again, from law enforcement that were in some of these group chats, they actually had reported that Secret Service was made aware of a threat at around 5:59 p.m. as a part of the command, including Secret Service, aware of messages and requests about information about the suspect's location. Can you please tell me if you have knowledge of that at all?
Again, I think we're conflating the difference between the term threat and suspicious.
But you guys did have knowledge at 5:59 p.m. according to those group chats, did you not?
Of a suspicious individual.
Okay. Chairman, in my opinion, according to some of the testimony today, I feel that you have perjured yourself in some instances, and so I'm going to ask for a full review of the transcripts by staff, and if you find that to be the case, I do ask that you bring perjury charges against the director. I will say this, it is very frustrating, and I've talked to my colleagues and we've said it to your face, that you have been up here basically stonewalling our ability to get the answers to the American people. And what I will also say is that every single member of Congress does not feel safe with you in charge. You have heard that, and I think that we are all sitting ducks with you in directing the Secret Service currently. But more importantly, it sends a message to our adversaries that we are not protected, and we are one of the strongest countries in the world, so you have essentially made us a less safe country because of it. As a result of that, I'm asking you to formally step down. I share my same opinions as my Democrat colleagues. And I also think that your efforts to bring forward a full investigation and report in 60 days is unacceptable. And as a result of that, I'm going to do everything in my legislative toolkit to ensure that that happens sooner rather than later. And I'm sure that you know that we brought a vote on inherent contempt against Garland for essentially blocking a congressional investigation, and I don't think that you should be any different. So I will say that I am just completely disgusted by your performance today, and I understand that you are probably in a position where you're being told not to testify, which is why we had to subpoena you. I think that goes back to Garland. But again, that is part of the flushing that we need to get out of Washington, and I would be happy to assist in that process. Chairman, I yield the rest of my time.
The agents piled on President Trump to protect his life. Those are heroes. But the administrators running your agency, they're not right now. They're not doing their jobs, and you certainly aren't doing. The most appalling part of Saturday's events is the countless opportunities that Secret Service had to stop Crooks before he even got on the roof. At 3 o'clock, Crooks raised suspicion by entering the rally with a rangefinder. At 5:45, a cop with a Beaver County Emergency Services unit saw Crooks eyeballing the roof at the AGR International Building. And then at 5:55, Secret Service was warned of a suspicious person and identifies Crooks as a threat. This was all before shots were fired 15 minutes later. Director, yes or no, did local law enforcement alert the Secret Service about Crooks' presence at the rally?
Yes, they did.
The shooter came to attention of law enforcement almost an hour before President Trump went on stage. Law enforcement alerted the Secret Service of the shooter. Over and over, you've said there's a difference between a suspicious individual and a threatening individual. Can you explain what the shooter needed to exemplify to be called a threat?
So I'm not clear as to what identified him as suspicious to the individuals who originally clarified him that way. For the Secret Service, for an individual to be determined to be a threat, that individual would have to be seen with a weapon or capable of doing some sort of harm to our protectees.
I mean, Director, an individual walking into a rally with a rangefinder, scoping out an unprotected rooftop, and he reportedly flew a drone over hours before. It sounds like a lot more than suspicious, especially at a presidential rally. Your operational lapses, your resource management, and poor judgment nearly resulted in the assassination of President Trump. I mean, the dereliction of duty here is just appalling. The fact that you haven't visited Butler is just maddening to me. That you're not taking this job seriously. Many people here have called for your resignation. I've introduced a resolution here into this body that hopefully will get a vote this week calling on the president to fire you, ma'am. You have not done your job. You have put two black eyes on your agency, and you need to go. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, that's what we call a smackdown. It's not good either. You can't be happy about that. It's sad. Even this guy said back here, right? He was just filming it for C-SPAN, a quality organization.